You will die. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but your name is already carved on a date you can't yet see. And the most terrifying part? You spend most of your life pretending that day doesn't exist. You scroll, you hustle, you chase pleasures, distractions, and dreams, while that silent clock inside you keeps ticking. Most people fear death. But the greatest minds in history, they didn't run from it. They turned around and stared it in the eye. Socrates welcomed it. Seneca used it. Nietzsche transformed it. And they didn't do this out of some morbid obsession. They did it because they knew something we've forgotten, that death isn't the opposite of life. It's the thing that makes life real. This video is not here to comfort you, it's here to wake you up. Because once you understand what these philosophers knew, you'll stop fearing death and finally start living. We live in a world that pretends death doesn't exist. We celebrate youth. We inject our faces. We bury our elders quietly with minimal ceremony, and then we scroll on like nothing happened. We don't speak of death. We don't plan for it. We don't even really understand it. And yet, it is the most certain thing about your existence. Every single person you've ever known, every hand you've ever shaken, every person who ever ruled, conquered, kissed, cried, danced, or dreamed, they're either already gone or on their way out. So why do we hide from it? Because it's terrifying. Because it feels meaningless. Because in a world obsessed with productivity and pleasure, there's no place for stillness, let alone silence. But what if we've been thinking about death all wrong? What if it's not just an ending, but a mirror? A mirror that shows us who we really are. A mirror that reveals what truly matters. A mirror that reflects how much time we've already wasted and how little we may have left. You see, the greatest philosophers, the ones who shaped human thought for centuries, they didn't hide from death. They confronted it. They examined it. They questioned it. They wrote entire philosophies around it, and not out of morbidity or fear, but because they understood one profound truth. To understand life, you must first understand death. Today, we're going to look at what these minds, Socrates, Seneca, Epicurus, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, really said about death. Not as abstract theories, but as raw, real, soul-shaking truths. Because once you see death the way they did, you might just stop living like you have forever. You might stop wasting time, stop chasing shadows, stop fearing the silence, and instead, start living like someone who knows the clock is ticking. This isn't just philosophy, it's a call to arms. Because if you're going to die anyway, you might as well die awake. Most people don't think about death until it's standing at their door. A diagnosis, a funeral, a near miss on a highway. That's when the illusion breaks. That's when everything you thought mattered suddenly doesn't. Your deadlines don't matter. Your arguments don't matter. Your carefully curated Instagram profile doesn't matter. In that moment, you realize something both terrifying and liberating. That you were always going to die, and that you've spent most of your life pretending you weren't. This is not a new problem. Thousands of years ago, the Roman philosopher Seneca said, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." We delay everything important. We avoid everything uncomfortable. We convince ourselves we'll do it later, but later is not promised. Modern society has only made this worse. We're constantly distracted, scrolling, swiping, binge-watching. We consume content every day but rarely consume truth. And death is the one truth we don't want to face. Religions once gave people frameworks for death. Heaven, hell, reincarnation. They offered meaning. But in a secular, fast-moving world, we've traded meaning for momentum. We keep moving, just so we don't have to stop and look too closely. That's where philosophy comes in. Because philosophy doesn't offer easy answers. It doesn't sugarcoat reality. It forces you to ask, what is the point of this life if death is inevitable? Philosophy, at its core, is preparation for death. The ancient Greeks knew this. The Stoics practiced it. The existentialists wrestled with it. The philosopher Michel de Montaigne once said, "To philosophize is to learn how to die." But this isn't about giving up. It's about waking up. When you start thinking about your death, really thinking, you start living more intentionally. You stop wasting time on people who don't matter. You stop chasing status you don't need. You stop saying someday, and start asking, if not now, when? This video exists because most people never have that conversation. Not with their friends, not with their family, not even with themselves. They push death aside like a distant storm. But that storm always arrives. So today we're going to do what most people won't. We're going to walk straight toward it. We'll go through the wisdom of 5 of the greatest philosophical minds and see how each of them confronted death in their own way. Their answers won't all agree. Some will comfort you, some will disturb you. Some might even change the way you live your next 24 hours. But all of them have one thing in common. They saw death not as the end, but as the ultimate teacher. And if you're brave enough to listen, you just might learn something about life. What the greatest philosophers said about death. 1. Socrates, death may be the greatest blessing. Socrates was sentenced to death in 399 BCE. He was accused of corrupting the youth and impiety against the gods of Athens, but in his final moments, surrounded by friends, offered a chance to escape. Socrates refused. He drank the poison, calmly, smiling, unshaken. Why? Because for Socrates, death was nothing to fear. In Plato's Apology, he says, "Death is either a dreamless sleep or a journey to another place. And if it is a dreamless sleep, then it is better than any night's rest. If it is a journey, then I get to meet the great minds who came before me. Either way, I do not fear it." To him, death was either peace or discovery, both preferable to a life of ignorance and cowardice. This was not blind optimism. Socrates had spent his life examining life's deepest questions. He didn't claim to have the answers, but he knew that to fear what we don't understand is foolish. Socrates was obsessed with truth, and if death was part of that truth, he would face it. This is where most of us differ from him. We don't examine death. We avoid it. We treat it as a glitch in the system instead of the system itself. But Socrates asks us to pause and consider, what if death is not the end? What if it's simply a transition? And even if we don't know what lies beyond, what makes us so certain it's worse than life wasted in fear? In a world filled with speculation and panic around mortality, Socrates gives us something rare: calm. Not because he knew what would happen, but because he accepted that he didn't, and in that acceptance he found freedom. 2. Seneca, Memento Mori, remember you must die. If Socrates gave us calm, Seneca gave us clarity. A Roman Stoic philosopher and advisor to Emperor Nero, Seneca lived close to power and closer to danger. He saw death every day, in the courts, in the streets, in the palace, and he made it part of his philosophy. His famous reminder was simple: Memento Mori, remember, you must die. To modern ears, that might sound morbid, but to Seneca, it was the key to living a focused, intentional life. He wrote, "Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books every day." Seneca believed that most people live like they're immortal, putting off their real dreams for someday. He saw this as a tragic waste. We delay the things that matter, telling people we love them, taking a leap we've dreamed about, leaving jobs that hollow us out, facing ourselves honestly, all because we believe we'll have time later. But death doesn't negotiate. Seneca urged people to meditate on death daily, not as fear, but as focus. When you remember you'll die, your priorities become clear. The petty becomes silent. The essential becomes obvious. You stop waiting. You start living. In today's hyper-distracted world, Seneca's wisdom is more urgent than ever. Memento Mori isn't a slogan, it's a lens, a way to ask yourself every day, If today were my last, would this still matter? And if not, why are you doing it? 3. Epicurus. Death is nothing to us. Where Socrates offered calm and Seneca gave focus, Epicurus gave us logic. He was a philosopher of pleasure, but not the kind you're thinking. Epicurus believed in peace of mind, not indulgence. And nothing, he said, disturbed the human mind more than fear of death. So he attacked that fear head-on. His argument was bold and simple. Death is nothing to us. When we exist, death is not present. And when death is present, we no longer exist. Think about that. When you're alive, you're not dead. When you're dead, you don't know it. So what exactly are you afraid of? Epicurus believed that most of our fear isn't about death itself, but about the idea of death. We suffer in our minds long before we ever die. This fear, he said, is irrational. You don't fear the time before you were born, so why fear the time after you're gone? For Epicurus, the goal was ataraxia, inner peace, freedom from anxiety, and to achieve that, one must destroy the fear of death. This idea is revolutionary because it flips the script. Death isn't the enemy. Fear is. Modern science, therapy, even neuroscience today echo similar points. That the brain reacts more to imagined threats than real ones. That the mind can torture itself with future shadows that never come. Epicurus challenges you to stop projecting your fears onto the unknown, and instead, to focus on the life you're in right now. 4. Arthur Schopenhauer. Life is suffering, death is liberation. Of all the philosophers on this list, Schopenhauer is perhaps the darkest. He didn't romanticize life. He didn't sugarcoat death. He believed that to exist was to suffer. His central idea was this: the will to live, a blind, irrational force that drives all life, is the root of suffering. We desire, we hunger, we chase things endlessly. Money, love, validation. And even when we get them, we're left restless. In Schopenhauer's eyes, life was a cycle of pain. Wanting what we don't have. Getting it, realizing it wasn't enough, starting over in death. Death was the only true escape from that cycle. He wrote, "We begin in the madness of carnal desire and the transport of delight, and we end in the dissolution of all our parts. The road between leads through suffering." To many, that sounds hopeless. But for Schopenhauer, it was clarifying. If life is suffering, and death is inevitable, then we should stop pretending it's all pleasure and progress. We should stop chasing illusions. We should see life clearly. And from that brutal clarity, find a strange kind of peace. Schopenhauer wasn't encouraging despair. He was calling for detachment. Much like Buddhist philosophy, he believed that letting go of desires is the only path to relief. And in death, where the self dissolves, where the will ceases, he saw liberation. For those who feel overwhelmed by the weight of modern life, Schopenhauer's realism can be oddly comforting, because it gives you permission to feel what you feel, to stop faking happiness, to stop pretending that everything must have a silver lining. Instead, it asks you to simply see things as they are, and in that rawness, maybe find something even deeper than joy. Relief. 5. Friedrich Nietzsche. Die at the right time. If Schopenhauer saw death as escape, Nietzsche saw it as a creative force. A sharp blade meant not to terrify you, but to cut away everything false in your life. Nietzsche was obsessed with the idea of living authentically. To him, most people lived like herd animals, obeying, conforming, numbing themselves. And death? Death was the great test. It asked one question: would you be willing to live this life again and again, forever? This is the idea behind his famous concept of eternal recurrence, the thought experiment where you are told that you must live your exact life, down to every pain and joy, on an endless loop. If that idea fills you with dread, Nietzsche says good. That means you're not living well. He writes, "The person who has truly embraced life would say, yes, again, 1,000 times again." So for Nietzsche, The fear of death wasn't the problem. Living a life unworthy of death was. And perhaps his most radical idea? That you should die at the right time. In his work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche says, "Die at the right time. So teaches Zarathustra. Whoever never lived at the right time cannot die at the right time." In other words, don't just die old. Die full. Die complete. Die when you have created the masterpiece of your life, not when you've run out the clock. This isn't a call for early death. It's a challenge to live in such a way that when death comes, you don't resist. You bow to it, like an artist who's finished the canvas. Nietzsche's death was tragic. Madness, isolation, suffering. But his ideas remain among the most electrifying in all of philosophy. Because he doesn't just ask you to think about death, he demands that you use it, fuel your fire with it. Let it sculpt the life you were too afraid to begin. Real-world application. How this philosophy can change the way you live and die. Most people avoid death until it's too late to do anything about it. But once you really internalize what these philosophers taught, your relationship with everything begins to shift. Let's make it real. 1. You stop postponing life. How many things are you waiting to do? I'll travel once I have more money. I'll quit when things calm down. I'll tell them how I feel. Later. But what if there is no later? Seneca's reminder, Memento Mori, forces a confrontation. If today were your last, what would suddenly matter, and what would vanish? Start living by this filter now. Don't wait to say what matters. Don't delay doing what fulfills you. Stop tolerating what drains you. Living with death in mind doesn't make life darker. It makes life urgent. 2. You redefine. What success means. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence is the ultimate test of authenticity. Ask yourself, would I be okay living this day, this job, this relationship, this routine, forever? If not, it's a sign, a call to redesign, to take more creative control over your time, your choices, your story. Success isn't what others admire. It's what you would choose again and again. That's the bar. 3. You find peace in the uncontrollable. Epicurus destroyed the fear of death by dismantling the illusion of control. You can't control what happens after death. You may not even control how or when it comes, but you can control how you face it. This is freedom. When you accept that death is not your enemy, fear is, you begin to move through life with more grace. You let go of the obsession with permanence. You stop needing every plan to work out. You realize that presence is the only true form of immortality. 4. You accept the pain and use it. Schopenhauer teaches us that suffering is not a glitch in the system. It is the system. When things hurt, heartbreak, loss, failure, you're not broken. You're human. And instead of wasting energy fighting that reality, you can redirect it into creativity, into meaning, into beauty. Some of the greatest music, literature, and art ever made was born from suffering. Your pain does not disqualify you from life. It qualifies you to live it more deeply. 5. You live ready, not waiting. Socrates went to his death with peace because he lived without lies. He didn't run from truth. He didn't pretend to know what he didn't. He lived examined, honest, awake. So when the end came, he had nothing to fear. What about you? Are you living in such a way that you could let go without regret? Are you telling the truth? Are you becoming someone you respect? Are you at peace with the person you are right now? Because in the end, it's not about how long you live. It's about whether you lived well. And living well starts the moment you realize you're already dying. What death teaches us about life. Let's bring everything into focus. Death, in the hands of philosophy, isn't a horror story. It's a mirror, held up to life, exposing what truly matters. Here are the key truths that echo across thousands of years of thought. 1. Death is not the enemy. Fear is. It is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live. Marcus Aurelius. From Epicurus to Socrates, the message is clear. It's not death itself that ruins us, and it's our terror of it. We waste years dodging the subject, pretending we're immortal, but death is not optional. What is optional is whether we meet it with fear or with freedom. 2. You don't have time. You make time. Seneca's warning is brutal but true. We live like we'll never die. But once you internalize that the clock is ticking, every moment becomes a decision. Spend it passively, and it disappears. Spend it with intention, and it multiplies. Life isn't short. We just spend too much of it on the wrong things. 3. A good death requires a good life. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence doesn't ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be honest. If you had to relive your life endlessly, would you change something? Then change it now. The goal isn't just to live long. The goal is to live in such a way that if death came tomorrow, you could say, yes, I lived fully. I was awake. I did not waste it. 4. Suffering is not a curse. It's a condition. Schopenhauer doesn't sugarcoat it. Life hurts. But that pain isn't proof something's gone wrong. It's proof that you're alive. The modern world sells comfort as the goal, but philosophy reminds us, it's in suffering that you grow, that you think, that you break open into something real. Use your pain. Don't run from it. 5. You will die, but you are not dead yet. Every breath is proof you're still here, and that means you still get to choose. Choose how you love, how you speak, how you work, how you create. One day, the choosing will end, but until then, you are the author, and the pen is still in your hand. The greatest philosophers didn't fear death. They studied it, stared into it, and from that darkness, pulled out light. So the question isn't, will you die? The question is, will you dare to live before you do? You've just walked through the minds of the greatest philosophers in history. Socrates, Seneca, Epicurus, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche. Each one faced death, and in doing so, showed us how to live. But here's the thing. Philosophy means nothing if it doesn't change you. So now the mirror turns to you. What in your life are you delaying? As if you have forever. Who do you need to forgive? What truth have you been avoiding? What beauty have you been blind to because you thought it would last? The clock is ticking, not to scare you but to wake you up. No one gets out of this alive. But some people die having never truly lived. Don't let that be your story. So here's your challenge. Not just for today, but for the rest of your time here. 1. Confront death regularly. Read the philosophers. Visit graveyards. Talk about death without fear. Write your own eulogy. Ask yourself daily, if this was my last day, would I be proud of how I spent it? 2. Design a life worth dying. After Nietzsche said, die at the right time. That means live with such intensity, honesty, and beauty that when the curtain falls, there's nothing left unsaid or undone. Be bold in your work. Be deep in your love. Be awake in your presence. 3. Share this message. There's someone in your life right now who's terrified of death, terrified of living, paralyzed by fear, distraction, or regret. Send them this video, not for views, but for clarity. Let these timeless voices speak to them too. Because maybe, just maybe, one reminder can change an entire path. If you made it this far, you're not like most people. Most scroll past death. You stopped, you looked, you listened. And that means you're ready to live on a deeper level. So go now. Say what needs to be said. Do what you've been avoiding. Create something that outlives you. And when the end comes, as it always will, let it find you living, not waiting.